Truth Unveiled here, and today I have a lot of information to share with you. And the question that's on our mind today is, are they getting ready for war? What exactly is really going on? Because as you see from a local Germany newspaper, it says Germany to chart first civil defense plan since the Cold War. Why get the military involved with anything? Because it even says that the defense ministry is looking at training the military to respond to major terror assaults. Aren't they doing that in America too? Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But the report itself says that Germany will introduce its first civil defense strategy since the end of the Cold War, calling on the population to stockpile enough food and water for several days, according to a report that was reported just yesterday. The plan, which makes civilian backing of troops a priority while boosting the resilience of buildings and increasing capacity in the healthcare system, is due to be adopted by the government on Wednesday, so just a few days from now, according to the FAZ Daily, or the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Contacted by AFP, an Interior Ministry spokesman confirmed that the cabinet was due to adopt a civil defense strategy, but declined details about the concept or comment on the newspaper report. Could it be martial law? Could it be a police state? Let's keep going, because then it says that the strategy noted that, quote, an attack on German territory requiring conventional defense is unlikely, but said the country should be sufficiently prepared in case of an existence-threatening development in the future that cannot be ruled out, according to the 69-page strategy quoted by the FAZ. And so now they're suggesting that the entire population of Germany should stockpile food for at least 10 days. Will anything happen within these 10 days? Only time will tell. Is it just more propaganda? Most likely, but we know something bigger is about to happen. But it's also interesting when it says that this year it set out a new military roadmap outlining Germany's ambition to assume a bigger defense role abroad within the frameworks of NATO and the European Union. The EU are more alphabet soups that are trying to what? Communism, socialism, that's all it is, and that's all they're trying to do. That's all they're trying to get ready for. But what's also interesting too is where they talk about, oh, it's because of ISIS, even though we know who actually funds ISIS. But then it's also very suspicious indeed when it says that the Defense Ministry is looking at training the military to respond to major terror assaults, while Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière last week announced tough new anti-terror measures, including a controversial proposal to strip jihadist fighters of their German nationality. Or is this just another excuse for them to bring in the police and military and conduct all of these things ahead of time? Let's find out. Now, I talked about this a few months ago, but I would just like to reiterate it once again, because here in America, they're also preparing like never before, and we know darn well that our tyrannical government is about to turn on the citizens one way or another, but they're going to need some help, of course, and who are they going to get help from? The alphabet soups, and that's who they're going to call, including FEMA and all those other ones. And we're going to talk more about FEMA and Obama and what they're doing. And we're also going to reiterate Cascadia Rising and what's been going on in Louisiana, as well as some of the situations worldwide in places such as Haiti and Venezuela later on. But right now, I'm at a remark that was made by Mr. Obama on hurricane preparedness, where it even says FEMA National Response Coordination Center. Now, I'd already gone over this a few months ago. I'm going to leave the video in the description box below if you would like to learn more about this, as well as the link for this so you can see it on your own time. But it's from the White House itself, and of course, in summary, it has to do with Mr. Obama and how he's talking about how they teamed up and met with the team's members getting ready and preparing for national emergencies, including key members of the Homeland Security Team, DHS, and the FEMA director as well. Why would they need to be doing that? Because they're getting ready for the hurricane season. Then it talks about the importance of being ready for a national disaster and being prepared for a national disaster. But what's very cryptic about this document indeed is when President Obama urges the need of a FEMA app, and he even says, if you need information about how to put together an evacuation plan, how to put together a disaster preparedness kit, as Craig said, the director of FEMA, we've got an app for everything now. We have a FEMA app in English and in Spanish to help you prepare your family for a disaster. You can update the National Weather Service alerts. You can get safety tips for more than 20 kinds of hazards. It provides you directions to nearby shelters. Well, the question is exactly which shelters is it directing you towards, and exactly what is FEMA doing with all of this, and where is that FEMA app leading people? Because we know darn well that there's a huge conspiracy with these FEMA camps, and no, it's not a conspiracy theory, it is a conspiracy fact. It's time you see exactly what they're really preparing for, and the question we should all be asking is why all this push for emergency and national disasters all of a sudden, and later on we'll talk more about that, but why, if everything is okay and if everything is hunky-dory and nothing to worry about here, there's obviously something bigger going on here. Now, I also talked about this a few months ago, but we also have Cascadia Rising 2016, and this is directly from the FEMA website. And the reason this is so important is because this was one of the largest FEMA drills that was ever conducted in America. So you can only imagine exactly what they're preparing for. But it says a 9.0 magnitude earthquake along the Cascadia subduction zone, or the CSZ, and the resulting tsunami is the most complex disaster scenario that emergency management and public safety officials in the Pacific Northwest could ever face. Cascadia Rising is an exercise to address that disaster. And of course, this was back in June of 2016, so it was only a few months ago. But just because it was a few months ago, it's still important to know these things and know that it's going on, and to also know that they're still preparing like never before. This is only just the beginning, folks. It's only a matter of time until these things start to come to fruition. And the question is, are you ready for it? I hope so. But then it talks about the Emergency Operations and Coordination Centers, or the EOCs and the ECCs, at the all levels of government and the private sector that will activate to conduct simulated field response operations within their jurisdictions and with neighboring communities, state EOCs, FEMA, and major military commands. So notice how everybody's involved with this. Notice how they have law enforcement and local law enforcement and the whole 9 yards, because they know what time it is as well. They know exactly what the military is about to do, and I'm going to tell you what they're about to do later on in this video to come. But then they give us this propaganda, and they try to feed us this propaganda that an earthquake here happens around an average of once every 200 to 500 years, and that the last major earthquake and tsunami along the fault occurred over 300 years ago, back in 1700, even though they weren't actually there to document this or record this. Do you really believe a word that they're telling you? Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that they're actually telling you the truth? Because what they're good at doing is that they're good at falsifying these statistics and making up these statistics in their heads in order to justify these man-made disasters and these man-made storms and these man-made hurricanes and tsunamis, courtesy HAARP and CERN. So yes, you should be concerned, just like we see with the San Andreas fault, because they're feeding us the propaganda that, oh yeah, San Andreas, there hasn't been an earthquake that happened in a long time. No, they're just using that in order for what? Depopulation. But if you do not believe me, then maybe you will believe a mayor from Louisiana who has even said that what the Louisiana flood was man-made. And according to him, that not only was this flood man-made, but there were walls that were set up along I-12 that prevented the water from draining out of the city, which made the water rise, as you can see right here. So why is that the case? And better yet, why was a state of emergency declared for a very long time? Because Louisiana is still under a state of emergency, and this state of emergency is to go all the way until September 10th of 2016, unless tentative changes are in fact made. Not only that, but we also see this with France as well, because of the alleged terrorism there. We even see more troops, like 10,000 more troops. Not only that, but we also even see too that the state of emergency is to last for over a year, well over a year, if not till 2017. Why? Because when you have a state of emergency, then you can use that as an excuse to bring in the military and to turn the country into a police state and make everything under surveillance, a one world government, new world order. Is that what they're trying to do? Of course it is. And that's why I'm here showing you Mr. Obama's sinister plan, the most sinister executive order there is out there, next to the FEMA executive orders, all unconstitutional, of course. But this is the National Defense Resource Preparedness, and it comes from March 16, 2012. And what this is about is what funding national emergencies and funding these FEMA camps literally. But then it says the purpose is that this order delegates authorities and addresses national defense resource policies and programs under the Defense Production Act of 1950 as amended the act. And that's why they're passing all these draconian acts, because they're using it as an excuse for detention centers, just like they did with the Japanese in World War II, lest we forget. But let's keep going. Section 102 says the policy that the United States must have an industrial and technological base that is capable of meeting national defense requirements and also capable of contributing to the technological superiority of its national defense equipment in peacetime and in times of national emergency. The domestic industrial and technological base is the foundation for national defense preparedness. The authorities provided in the act shall be used to strengthen this base and to ensure it is capable of responding to the national defense needs of the United States. But what if I told you that all these authorities that are listed in this act, what if I told you that it's all just an act? That's why they even call it an act, because they're literally telling you that's what it is, because all of these organizations know darn well that they're the ones planning all of these things and staging all of these things ahead of time, and they even know that they're using HAARP and CERN as tools for sudden destruction. And yes, our Father sends storms as well, but trust me, you'll know when our Father sends a storm. But the reason I'm trying to share this with you is because it's all staged, it's all predicted ahead of time. They like to give you the propaganda of, oh yeah, we're just preparing and getting ready for something. No, they've already prepared and they know exactly what they're doing, just like Mr. Obama and all of them have made evacuation plans and drills to go underground when all of these things have happened, not to mention how the elite have already left America. They've already packed their bags and they left. But the question is, do you know these things? But section 103 is interesting when it talks about the general functions, because subsection C says to be prepared in the event of a potential threat to the security of the United States, to take actions necessary to ensure availability of adequate resources and production capability, including services and critical technology for national defense requirements. Oh, well, they already have these things. They've been preparing and they have been stockpiling weapons and ammunition and the like, as well as vaccines, for a very long time. Are they getting ready for a staged pandemic? Of course they are. Now, this is just one of the most recent bills. It's called H.R. 390 at the 113th Congress first session. And what this is this is getting ready for what? The National Emergency Centers Establishment Act. And this was a bill that was introduced by Congress as of January 23rd, 2013 in the House of Representatives. Now, why this is so important is because it confirms what's been going on in Germany as well as what's going on here in America, how they're literally getting ready for all of these disasters to take place, and they're getting ready and opening up these centers and emergency centers. Why all of this preparation once again? And that's the question I pose to each and every one of you. And now it's interesting, if you read section 2, the establishment of national emergency centers, it says, A, in general, in accordance with the requirements of this act, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall establish not fewer than 6 national emergency centers on military installations. And we know too from my Walmart's video that they will be converting these military installations into FEMA prison camps, and they've already done that. It's already ready to go. The only ones that's missing from these detention centers is you. Then it says that the purpose of them is to do these things: to provide temporary housing, medical, and humanitarian assistance to individuals and families dislocated due to an emergency or a major disaster. But that's what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that it's temporary when this is simply not the case. But then 2 says to provide centralized locations for the purposes of training and ensuring the coordination of federal, state, and local first responders, so the ones that they hire and put in place. And 3, to provide centralized locations to improve the coordination of preparedness, response, and recovery efforts of government, private, and not-for-profit entities and faith-based organizations. Sounds like the clergy response team to me. And in case you're wondering what clergy response teams are, then I highly recommend you watch my video linked in the description box below to learn more about them. But it's interesting because this report comes from RT News and it talks about what Mr. Obama has even admitted, that they're training up ISIL forces, that they're even training ISIS. And I'm going to tell you what they're really training them for, because it's not just to be used overseas, because yes, your government funds ISIS, and yes, your president has even admitted that to your face, because it says we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in the Anbar province. And we know that the government, including John Kerry and all those other Zionists at the top, we know darn well that they're funding them and they're training them in nations such as Jordan and Saudi Arabia in order to use them to pillage different places, just like they do with the military. Just ask the UN, because what you're going to see is that the UN has been doing some very evil things to places like Haiti, indeed. But what the elite are also not going to tell you is that they've already been sneaking in all of these alleged refugees, and they've been disguising themselves as refugees in order to be used to bring what? ISIS to America, because that's the agenda. They're going to turn the problem internally, and then they're going to call you a domestic terrorist if you're watching this video, because you could be, and then they're going to use that as an excuse to place you into these FEMA camps or wherever they deem necessary. They're going to use them in order to start so-called alleged terrorism, when we know better than that. But I've reported on this many times as well. But once again, I'm showing you that your government has been stockpiling and preparing for health catastrophes. Now, why would they need to do such a thing like that at such a time as this, with everything that we're seeing in Germany and other places as well? Something's definitely not adding up. Now, I also equated this with the so-called Zika virus that we've been seeing spread in America all of a sudden, as well as all of the poisoning that your government's doing by spraying all of those pesticides and dangerous chemicals in the air, just like they do with these chemtrails and putting fluoride in the water, but no big deal there. But this is interesting because Greg Burrell, who is supposed to be the director of a program called the Strategic National Stockpile, or the SNS at the CDC, has been stockpiling all of these things for a long time. Now, while it may sound fine and good, it says the location of these warehouses is secret. How many there are is a secret. Some say 6, but they don't know exactly, just because they're not telling us. But then they value the inventory a little over $7 billion. I wonder why they need $7 billion worth of medical supplies. And if you're wondering the types of supplies that they have millions of doses of vaccines against bioterrorism agents like smallpox, antivirals, chemical agent antidotes, wound care supplies, IV fluids, and antibiotics. But I don't trust my government whatsoever. I don't trust the help that they're trying to give me. Anytime you hear that, it's time to run quick, fast, and in a hurry, because it's only a big scam. And sadly, they're not the only ones preparing, because like I said, they're obviously getting ready for a big pandemic. Just look at the movie The Fifth Wave. It's predictive programming. That's all it is. They've been doing these things a long time and for a long time. But you also have your lovely military with documents such as FM 3-19.4, which is the Military Police Leaders Handbook. Now, what's interesting about this handbook that comes from the Department of the Army is that when you actually look at it clearly, you start to see a blueprint and a map of how they're literally training the police to use against citizens in order to do what? Turn against the citizens. Literally, is that what they're really doing here? And because this document is over 640 pages long, we're not going to go over all of it. But what I did just want to show you real quick is the different chapters and the overviews. As you can see, they have force protection, and they talk about military police functional areas. They talk about so-called threats, and they talk about battle commands in the overview with that. They also talk about shoot, move, and communicate. And then what's interesting is they talk about combat operations in order to prepare for combat, construct fighting and survivability positions, defend a site, patrols, and clearing techniques. But my question is, why do they need a 640-page document along with many others about how to defend citizens and how to protect the citizens according to them? unless they never really had our interest to begin with. But are they testing everything worldwide before they bring it to America? Well, this seems to say so, because here I am from a report of New York Times that was dated back in August 17, 2016, that says UN admits role in cholera epidemic in Haiti. And we know darn well that's their way of testing. Just look at Kashmir and you'll see how the UN, they're literally bringing troops there in order for what? Massive genocide, just like everywhere else. And there's just one other place that is left to destabilize, and that place is America. But we know they're testing it with Venezuela, because just a few months ago, back towards the end of May of 2016, their military has just gotten involved, and we see the UN involvement in other places too. The last place is America. Are you ready for it? Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha so that you can be. But this is Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated and saying as always, peace, love, and shalom.